Now, to give you guys a little backstory as to who I am and where I come from, my name is Juan Carlos Rodriguez. I am 27 years old. I am born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a first generation Mexican American, as well as my older sister. And it got to the point where I remember my mom telling me a story about how in the middle of class, I have no memory of this at all whatsoever, I would do headstands in the middle of class. I love performing in front of people. I loved it. Now, let's talk about my writing process. When I first started writing Work in Progress, I wanted to come at it from the angle of, okay, you've established that you are taking this dream serious, but now you also have to understand that, success will not happen overnight. I'm kind of glad it's not happening overnight, because the amount of times that you've heard the stories where the amount of times where artists have blown up one year and then fell off the next and then have a hard time, getting back to where they were. I'm grateful that my journey's taking a little longer, because that means that not only will my fan base and my people support me and the level be actually deeper, but that I will actually have a discography to let's say I blow up next year with one song, I have work that people can go back and listen to. So essentially the way I write, I always come at it from a mature and open-minded perspective. Like, obviously I do have some tracks where I flex a little bit, I talk my shit, but when I write, I make sure that there's poetry first, because rap stands for rhythm and poetry, and I want to make sure that poetry is first. When I write, that's essentially the angle that I come at it with. And so when I started writing Work in Progress EP, I wanted to write it in a way where not only does the music sound good, but I wanted to send a message. Right? And each track, it talks about once you establish what you want your dream to be, there's even more things that you're gonna deal with. For example, when I started writing Let's Get This Started, that was more of like a hey, I'm back type of track, where it's like, I'm gonna talk my shit for a little bit, yada yada yada. But we're still continuing this journey. We're still continuing, me talking about me as a person and shit that I've seen, that I've heard, and I've experienced myself. Going on to the next track, Talk Less and Do More. When I started writing that, my thought process was, alright, what's the one thing that people tend to always do? A lot of people tend to just do this. That's all they do. They just talk. I came at it with that mentality of, I'm at the point in my life where I want to talk less and do more. I have no interest in indulging in nonsense, fucking around and just, talking about the same shit with the same people. I don't want to do that. The song Talk Less and Do More, it's essentially to the point where it's I'm at the point in my life where I'm going to talk less and I'm going to do more. Because the amount of times that I personally heard, oh, in a few years I want to do this, or in a few years I'm going to own that, or da-da-da, and then you come back to them a few years later and you're like, hey, do you have any updates in regards to what you wanted to do? And they're like, nah, but just give it a few more years, and then next thing you know, all this time passes by, and then the amount of times that we've heard stories of, man, if only I would have done this, if only I would have done that, da-da-da. So essentially, I feel like people tend to live through the opinions of others, where they remain stagnant and they end up settling for a check, and they end up settling for comfortability. And that's not what I'm about. I'm not about comfortability. I'm not about, settling for a check and, choosing the safe option. That's not me. That's not who I am. Which then leads me into Work in Progress, where Work in Progress is essentially a reminder that while you're building everything from scratch, while you're chasing your dream, while you take steps, you have to understand that, again, success is not overnight, and that you don't want it to be overnight. Just keep grinding, keep hustling, you know what I'm saying? Of course, you have to put the effort in, because not everything will fall in your lap. That's not how that works. You have to put effort in, because once you put effort in, that's when people can actually see that, oh, this guy's serious about his thing. Because the amount of I'm sure y'all can relate. The amount of times that we've heard people like tell stories of how like no one supported them and like it was them against the world or whatever. But it's because when you're first starting out, people don't know if you're serious. People don't know if it's a hobby. People don't know if you're just doing this like as a phase. People don't know. And so it's not until you actually get serious about what you want to do, that's when people started taking serious. Which then leads to the next song, No Distractions. When I started writing No Distractions, I wrote it in a way where it's a reminder and like the main reason as to why I'm doing what I do. And that right now I'm at a point in my life where I can't afford to have any distractions. I really can't. I just can't afford to have any distractions. Because, again, being a first generation Mexican American, it would be a waste of an opportunity for me to just sit here and do nothing. Sit here and just settle for a bullshit ass job that's gonna fire me tomorrow if they wanted to. You know, that's the thought process that I, came with. In the bridge, I talk about how this is where I actually reference this Twitch streamer by the name of Phantom, where he was talking about his mom and how his mom sacrificed a lot for him to get to where he is. Well, like one of the main things that stuck with me was he was like, "Mama put in pay for me, so whatever she wants, she got it. She earned that." So when I wrote the bridge, that's the mentality that I had, where I talk about Mama put in pay for me. Always made sure that she had a plate for me. All those nights that she would stay up late for me, and all those fucking times that she would wait for me. What that means is that, Mama put in so many sacrifices, and she did a lot for me and my sisters, and to, help, push us through. She would always make sure that me and my sisters always had a plate of food to eat, regardless of, if she made, very little money. She always made sure that we had a hot plate. The amount of times, for example, when I got my first job, the amount of times that she would stay up late to make sure that I got home. And and when I couldn't take the bus, or when it was a little late and I couldn't afford to get lifts home, or back when lifts weren't a thing, or lifts or Ubers back when they weren't a thing, she would always wait for me at my job for me to clock out. Which then leads to the next song, Lonely Road. And Lonely Road, I wrote it in a mentality of not only is a road that I'm choosing to go to lonely, but my past has been lonely because I grew up a very, isolated and lonely kid because, again, I grew up bullied and I grew up being picked on, and I had to fight for respect. The final track, Remember the Name, when I first started writing it, I essentially asked myself the lifelong question of, when is your time to go? When is your time to leave this earth? How do you want to be remembered? I then started writing where it's like, well, I want to be remembered as a kind and empathetic, type of person. I want to be remembered as a guy who showed, none but love and, showed support and appreciation every time he could. And this was actually my mistake when it came to my older sister, was that I waited until she was gone to, tell her that I loved her. I had so many chances and I had so many opportunities to, say it, but I never did. And so because of that, I always try to make sure that I let people know, like, hey, I love you and I appreciate you, and I'm thankful that you're here. Yeah, it's one of those things where I really do hope that I'm, remembered fondly. And of course, we all have enemies that we've made. We've all had people that, we've done dirty. We've all had, situations where we made choices that hurt people. But, regardless, we always try to do the best with what we have, with what we know. And so sometimes you may end up hurting people. I've been the type of guy where I've started opening up myself to having those hard conversations with people and asking for forgiveness. And, really coming from a genuine place, because I kind of feel like beefs and, feuds are kind of pointless. Because all it takes is just one mature conversation to be like, all right, this is where I'm coming from. I want to see where you're coming from. Let's reach a, common ground, apologize, and, let's fix our behaviors, That's the angle that I came at with Remember the Name. One final thing I'll say about my writing process is that whenever I start writing verses, and I've told other artists that I meet as well, is that if you want me to collaborate with you, I have to feel not only the instrumental, but I have to feel the project and the topic in my spirit. Because if I can't feel it in my spirit, I can't write to it. I can't write a verse. All right, so this answers a question that I've been asked plenty times, and this is my recording process.
All of this is strictly business. This is something that I know that you gon' wanna witness. Yeah, you better know that I'm a witness, and I'ma push myself to surpass my fucking limits. Yeah. All of this is strictly business. This is something that I know that you gon' wanna witness. Yeah, you better know that I'm a witness, and I'ma push myself to surpass my fucking limits. Yeah, had to close them doors and change the lock.